You're starting to see deal flow. You're starting to see IPOs again.
Yeah.
So that's an indication that things may be turning and things may get healthier from here.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Dales Reports Trade to Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Happy New Year. Cannabinoids. It's a big thing. It's probably going to be in everyone's medicine cabinet in the next 10 years, and it's a big, big industry. We've had this company on a few times in the past, so let's welcome back to the podcast Eric Adams, the CEO of InMed Pharmaceuticals. Welcome back and Happy New Year. How are things?
Things are great, Shad. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. How's the holiday season before we get into business?
Somehow it seems to never slow down. So there's always a lot of things that we got to check off our list as we close the year end or the calendar year end. And, so we'll try to find some time to catch some deep breaths before we absolutely turn up the volume for this year.
God, like you got what, maybe 5-10 minutes off of work?
15 this year. It was a good year.
Yeah? Oh, sounds like a great year. All right, so let's begin. Last week, you put out a very comprehensive press release highlighting last year's achievements as well as outlining plans for the upcoming year in 2023. From reading the release, the big takeaway for me was how much you, InMed, has going on with respect to rare cannabinoids. So first, let's speak to 2022. You managed to make some notable strides despite all the global challenges, especially in the capital markets. So can you take us through some key highlights just for people that know your story, but at the same time, too, are learning about your story for the first time?
Sure. So we focus on developing rare cannabinoids for diseases with high unmet medical needs. So we're straight up a pharmaceutical company. Everything that we do with our pharmaceutical drug development candidates has to go through clinical trial testing and FDA review. So from that perspective, we are a traditional pharma company. We're working with a number of different rare cannabinoids and cannabinoid analogs. Our most advanced program is the INM-755 program in a rare genetic skin disorder called epidermolysis bullosa, or EB.
Okay.
So we are in phase 2 clinical trials right now, looking at the potential safety and efficacy of this treatment. It's a skin cream for this dermatological disorder. Over the course of the last year, we activated 11 clinical trial sites in 7 countries in Europe to conduct this phase 2 study. We were able to expand beyond just the adult population to include adolescents into this study, which is a strong indication that the safety data looks pretty good. And we were able to enroll 15 patients through the course of the year.
Okay.
We enrolled a 16th here in early January. And we extended the enrollment period so that we can get the full cohort of our targeted 20 patients. And we anticipate that taking the next couple of months to complete. That'll give us a data readout sometime in the early second half of the year. But we're really excited about that program and really trying to identify where this cannabinoid, in this case it's CBN or cannabinol, where it can provide symptom relief and potential disease modification in these patients who have very critical disease.
Okay. You extended the trial, your leading trial, which is INM-755, as you alluded to the end of March. First off, what was the reasoning behind the extension?
Well, we hadn't enrolled the full cohort of patients by the end of the year.
Okay.
This is a small disease. It's very difficult to enroll patients in the first place. Our clinical trial design requires that each patient have identical wounds on identical part of their bodies so that we can treat one of them with just the cream or the vehicle without the drug in it, and the other wound can receive, or the other site can receive, the vehicle plus the drug, so that we can do an on-patient or inpatient comparison between what happens if you just put the cream on and what happens if you put the cream plus the drug on. Is there a difference between these two treatment sites? So it complicates the enrollment a little bit, but the data that we get out of it is much more robust and much more complete. So we just extended the trial to March so that we can get the full targeted 20 enrollees.
Okay, you talk about enrollment. The trial itself is double-blinded. I like to ask this question a lot because as much as you and I talk about this, and it seems pretty straightforward with the language that we use, but maybe explain to the average investor what a double-blinded trial is in the pharma space, like meaning how it works and the significance of it all.
Sure. So double-blinded means that the people who are administering the drug, so the physician, the nurse, and the patient, they don't know which site is receiving just the vehicle, which would be the control or the placebo, if you will, and which one is getting the active drug. So they don't know which of these two treatment sites are getting which. We don't know that either. So you have to go through and assess as best you can the improvement of these two different sites. And then once we have all of the data collated, you do what they call break the blind, and you see which one received which, either the vehicle or the drug plus the vehicle. So it's the most robust way to conduct a trial. It's required for most advanced clinical trials, just so there's no bias. You don't want someone to receive it and they know that one site has the drug in it, so mentally they may say, well, I feel better here, or this looks better, right? So you want to keep it completely blinded so that no one knows what is being used where until after all the data has been collated.
Let's touch on some of your other programs, including your glaucoma program, a program that we really have not had much attention on this program through 2022. You mentioned you had an IND meeting and gained alignment with the FDA. What was the big takeaway from that meeting?
Well, what we wanted to do is introduce, number one, the company, number two, the molecule that we're working with, which is also cannabinol in this instance, and just lay out the foundation for why we want to move forward with this product, the data that we've seen in preclinical studies, how we feel that supports moving into humans, and then to try and just suss out a little bit of the intricacies as to what we intend to do in the human clinical trials. So the FDA doesn't approve, they don't give this a stamp of approval. A lot of people say, oh, the FDA approved our clinical trials. They don't do that. What they do is they try to understand what you're trying to do, and then they say, yeah, if you're successful in your approach, then we think that would lead to a further discussion and advanced clinical trials. So
what can investors then expect timeline-wise as to what next steps pertaining to that program?
Well, importantly, what we also discussed is what additional data would be required to support a human clinical trial. So we said, here's the data that we have to date. We propose adding this additional data. Do you agree that this would be sufficient as a full package to go into humans? And so we got alignment with that. We're now conducting those what we call GLP toxicology studies, or IND-enabling toxicology studies. Those are being conducted right now. They'll be conducted over the course of the next several quarters. And we're looking to file and initiate human clinical trials in early 2024 with this program.
Okay. We've touched on this in the past, but let's get an update and remind our viewers and investors out there, when looking at your glaucoma program, what makes, I guess, this approach different, and why would it potentially interest Big Pharma?
Well, there's a lot of products that can actually relieve the pressure buildup in the eye that's related to glaucoma, and that's really what sets the stage for all of the damage to the optical nerve and eventually leads to blindness. So there's a lot of things. There's generics out there. People are smoking marijuana to relieve this pressure. That's probably providing them some relief. But what we saw is that
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, THC is the big component or the major cannabinoid in marijuana. It can also do the same thing that we're doing with cannabinol, and that is help drain the fluid that's causing this buildup of pressure. Now, there's no safety information on that. There's been no clinical trials on that. So, it's not that we're encouraging people to go do that. Just like most eye doctors will not encourage their patients to do that, because there's been no trials, there's been no safety data, there's been no dosing data, like how much do you need to take in order to affect the change.
So let me ask you, how does one come to find, you're not making recommendations, but how does one come to find that you're seeing, or at least hearing, some of that, I guess, fluid that's being drained because of that?
Well, we can measure that in these trials that we're doing, right? In the preclinical trials, and then in the human clinical trials, we'll be actually measuring the intraocular pressure in these patients. With people who are smoking marijuana, again, they probably feel some relief. They can feel it. It can be a painful condition, and that this can release the pressure and decrease the pain. But again, the problem is there's no safety information, there's no dosing information.
Yeah, I get it.
And what we've seen, and what's really interesting for CBN, is that it provides neuroprotective activity to the neurons at the back of the eye. So we have these neurons, these nerve cells at the back of the eye. Those give us vision. And what happens in glaucoma with this pressure buildup is that these neurons die, and it's irreversible. What we've seen with our compound is that there's the ability of these to go to these neurons and actually protect them from cell death, both under normal circumstances, but also under this elevated pressure circumstance. So there's kind of two components that we're looking at. One is, can we relieve the pressure? We think we will be able to do that and demonstrate that. But can we also protect the neurons and prolong vision, or decrease the deterioration of vision? So that's something that we're going to be looking at in our trials and trying to really establish. And that's a hot spot in the space of ocular drug development right now.
That is really interesting. So you're finding that CBN is actually protecting the cells in the back of the brain, meaning the neurons. Like, how exactly?
Back of the eye, yeah.
Back of the eye, exactly. So what do you see? Like, how does that work?
It's probably way too scientific to go into right now, and it's probably a little bit over my head as well. But we do have the scientists, the PhDs who are handling all of that. But it's a very interesting effect, and we don't see that, for instance. Well, there's what we call a therapeutic window. How much drug do you need, to be effective, and then how much can you give until it's toxic? Right, and so that's what's called your therapeutic window, and you want a very big therapeutic window just from a safety perspective. Yeah. So we've established that there's a very wide therapeutic window with CBN. But what we've seen in our studies using THC as a comparator is that the therapeutic window is like this. So you need this much to be active, but if you give more than this, it's toxic. It actually becomes neurotoxic, and it advances the cell destruction, the neuron destruction. So people should be very careful about that. And again, there's no studies to support it. There are companies who are looking at this with THC as potential use, but in our experiments, the therapeutic window is very small, and that's one of the flags that come up where you say, well, we can't, we wouldn't develop that drug because of this. You want this.
Yeah. What I find interesting about your research pipeline is the diseases that you're focusing on and how there's such a huge need for it in society. I don't want to sit here and say there hasn't been a lot of research pertaining to these diseases in the past, but there really hasn't been a lot of breakthrough. But when I look at, and as we shift now to your neurodegenerative disease programs, the treatment of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's, etc., these are alarming rates right now within society. This was the focus of our last interview back in December. And the one thing that I guess struck me from that interview was the approach you're taking in comparison to, say, other companies in the space. So first off, again, to my viewers that are watching this and learning your story for the first time, he explained the different challenges associated with your current Alzheimer's approaches and remind investors as to what InMed is doing and what makes, I guess, cannabinoids an interesting compound.
Yeah, so there's a number of things that led to us to start investigating these neurodegenerative diseases. First of all, the data from the ocular program where we saw neuroprotection, and that's a really important, interesting feature of these compounds. Secondly, we know that these compounds can get into the brain, that cannabinoids are able to penetrate what we call the blood-brain barrier. And so not all drugs can actually get into the brain. They can get into circulation, but the brain will not allow them transport into it. Cannabinoids are a class of compounds that can transport into the brain. So then you start to think, okay, well, now what can they do when they get there? The other thing that we should point out is that cannabinoids are inherently pretty safe compounds. The body itself makes 2 cannabinoids, which gives us this inherent predisposition to interact with this class of compounds. Yeah. So the body recognizes them. It has receptors ready to work with these cannabinoids. So they get into the brain, they're relatively safe, and we've seen neuroprotection in other models. So that led us to say, well, can we get into the brain and impact these neurodegenerative diseases? So what we're doing is looking at them, in particular Alzheimer's, and we're seeing a number of things that we think are going to be beneficial. So it's not just one mode of activity. There's several things that cannabinoids can do, and in particular the one that we've identified.
Can you share what you're seeing, or do you have to keep that confidential?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what status our patent is, whether it's been made public or not. So I should probably stay quiet on that until all of this gets published. But we're seeing a number of things.
But it's very promising, is more or less, is what you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I grow more excited about this every day, and every time I chat with the research team about what we're seeing and what we're trying to accomplish in our preclinical models. So I think this could be a really important, new area of research. We are using our analog program, which we acquired in our Biomedica acquisition. So we take the natural cannabinoids and we modify them to either increase their efficacy or their safety or their delivery. Those are all beneficial, but another big benefit is that we can actually patent and own the molecule itself, which you can't do with naturally occurring cannabinoids. You can't own a patent on that, but we can own a patent on these compounds. And our patent is very broad. It covers hundreds, if not thousands, of different modifications to these compounds. So now the job is to screen these, find out which ones are really attractive. We've identified 2 that we're moving forward with before we pick a lead compound. But we're very excited about this whole program.
Overall, how advanced is that program?
We're still in preclinical testing, so we will be moving, into toxicology. Once we select the final candidate, we'll have to make sure we know how to manufacture it, how to scale that up to higher levels. Make sure the costing on that is appropriate. We'll have to do the toxicology studies, and eventually this will lead down to the avenue to discussions with the FDA, similar to what we've done with the ocular program. In anticipation of moving into human clinical trials, which is still a year and a half, 2 years away. But that's a short timeline in our world.
Strategy 2023 then, pure biotech play right now, as I'm getting a lot of the feedback within your company. Been hit hard, obviously, in the last 18 months to 2 years, this industry, but you feel that if there's ever any industry, when you see this economy start to rebound, I can't help but think, based on all the research and innovation that's taken place in so many levels within biotech for the last 18 to 24 months, you're going to really see this industry rally. When that happens, I don't know, but do you not think there's some momentum that will quickly grow once we make a turn for the better with the overall market?
Well, you're starting to see money slowly come back into the space. You're starting to see deal flow. You're starting to see IPOs again.
Yeah.
So that's an indication that things may be turning and things may get healthier from here. I mean, right now, the entire industry is upside down. There's several companies, including ours, that are trading below. Our market cap is below the actual cash we have in the bank. We have over a year in the bank right now, so it's ridiculous levels. So if people are interested in investing in biotech, now is a good time to do it and we're not alone. I mean, there are hundreds of companies who are in the same state. They have more cash in the bank than their market cap. We are fortunate that we have over a year's cash, depending on how we deploy it and how aggressive we want to be. But we have over a year of cash in the bank right now. A lot of companies, hundreds of companies, can't say that. Dilution is always really painful, especially at the levels that we've had to raise money. But we've been successful in raising money. There are people who have sparked to the story that we're telling and the hope that we think we have in our pharmaceutical programs. So I take that as a positive. It's painful, but at least we get through this year, get through some meaningful milestones, and let's see how things develop in the financial markets.
Well, you touched on a few financial points there, and when we look at your balance sheet, access to capital, no surprise, definitely a concern for the majority of small cap companies over the past year, especially in biotech. But following your last financing in November, you say that you have cash basically for another year. I believe you have around $14 million in the bank. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can't disclose what we have. Our financials come out mid-February for our December 31st quarter end. But yeah, we based on what we had plus what we raised, we had upwards of $14-15 million in the bank at that time. So Yeah, we're pretty well positioned. We're actually able to catch our breath, focus very clearly on the pharmaceutical drug development programs, and plot our course for the next year.
So the runway, you're thinking a year, and I guess does this allow you to hit these milestones that we've discussed?
Well, we will finish the phase 2 for EB, and we'll have the data readout early in the second half of the calendar year. We are advancing the glaucoma program. We'll be compiling the IND, the investigational new drug application, to enter human clinical trials. We'll be advancing and getting several data readouts in the neurodegenerative disease program. We call that the 900 series, the INM 900 series. We'll be selecting a lead compound, and we'll be initiating a lot of the research activities needed to advance that into human clinical trials as well. And supporting all of this, we have the analog program. So when we acquired BayMedica in the U.S., part of what we acquired was a very extensive patent portfolio, not only on the manufacturing and all kinds of know-how around how to scale these up and make these at commercial scale, but changing these molecules and modifying them in a way that they're, number one, patent protected, and number two, can do these other things that I highlighted: increase efficacy, potentially increase safety, potentially increase deliverability. So we have this library, and really what we want to do is attract other people's interest into this space, and then have discussions with them about collaborations where we can dive into our library and maybe find compounds that may interest them. If it's not core to what we're doing, maybe there's other beneficial applications of these molecules.
One thing's for sure, investors know this stock. Wow, the volume some days. It is crazy how much volume gets traded on this stock. But listen, I appreciate the update. I appreciate the outlook for 2023. Best of luck. And maybe you didn't get it necessarily like an actual present in hand before Christmas, but maybe you spoke to Santa and asked for maybe the biotech industry being turned around for 2023. And if you did, let's hope Santa comes through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Appreciate the update. Keep in touch, okay?
All right. Thanks.
All right. Take care. Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. 2023 is here, and right now, a lot of uncertainty pertaining to the markets, especially new emerging industries like crypto, cannabis, psychedelics, and more. So leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview. What are the questions that you want asked? And most importantly, what's the information that you want to learn? Once we produce these videos, then share this to your network, subscribe to our channel, and click on that bell for all notifications, because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.